Hi, I'm Dr. Montagny. Today we're going to talk about food responses. Do you ever wonder if you have any problems with different kinds of foods? You wonder why certain patches on your skin seem to be dry, be scaly, some itch more than others. Some people might wonder why they have dandruff. Others wonder, why do they cough all the time? What's asthma come from? These are a huge amount of questions that are really related to the foods and the foods that we eat. So if you've ever wondered what's going on with food intolerances, stick around for a little bit. It's a pretty interesting talk. When we start to look at these, most people think that they have food allergies, but the reality is food allergies aren't really that common. We have more of a prevalence of food intolerances than we do food allergies, and because so few people really look at the literature openly and honestly in this manner, there's a lot of disagreement on the entire subject. And because of the disagreement, people really don't have access to get the kind of help that they need to try and get over some of these things. So we look at some of the studies. About 50 to 60% of all blood tests and skin prick tests are going to give you false positive results. Now that's kind of alarming, but that's what the research is telling us. And in fact, this is being a lot more conservative than what the reality is. Years ago, I was looking up why some files that were given to me didn't make a lot of sense. And the reality is, what I came to find at that point in time is that the skin prick and the blood tests, they could only measure about 2 to 3% of the food intolerances or the food allergies that are out there. The other 97, 98% of the response that are going on, they had no idea what they were and no idea on how to measure them. One thing that's interesting about research that comes out like that, if it goes against the grain and threatens industry, those things tend to disappear. And you can't find them anymore. But you can find everything that relates to it. So when we start looking at some of the journals from, this one here is from the American Academy of Allergies, Asthma, and Immunology. So pretty reputable group. They're looking at the food intolerance or the food allergy testing that's going on. And they say the scientific studies that are provided to support these kind of testing are often out of date, in non-reputable journals, and many of them haven't even used the immunoglobulins that they claim to be measuring. They say that the IgG response is most likely a response just to our ingestion of food. It's a normal response. It's not an allergy reaction. And it may be an indication more of tolerances to foods than intolerances. And because of lack of evidence that supports this kind of testing, there's many organizations that won't accept their results. Those organizations include the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, the Canadian Society of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, the European Academy of Allergy and Clinical Immunology have all recognized that the test measuring IgG don't diagnose food allergies, and they reject the results. So it's not a wonder with this kind of controversy in this whole industry why so many people have so many problems, and those problems continue without any resolution. When we start to look at some of the other ways that foods respond to us, it makes things make a lot more sense, and it makes it understandable that most of the responses we have are food intolerances, not food allergies. When we look at the IgG measurements, those aren't really the ones that are involved in allergenic responses. Those are primarily IgE responses. Those can be measured in some of the tests, but once again, the societies we just mentioned don't accept the results because they're not really validated by science. People are looking at responses and projecting as if they're measuring something that they haven't really actually measured. So some of the things they have measured with food responses is with gluten. In one response with gluten, gluten reduces the flow of blood into the brain. Now the brain uses a significant amount of energy that we have in our entire body. It consumes a significant amount of oxygen also. If we reduce the blood supply in the brain can't work properly. If it can't work properly, then all the functions that we depend on in our brain aren't really working the way that we think that they are. They've looked at other studies. Gluten will produce depression and anxiety, insomnia, brain fog, ADHD, migraines, peripheral neuropathy, that's nerve degeneration going off anywhere outside of the spine, epilepsy, vertigo, schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, and autoimmune responses, especially in the brain. Now, that's not an allergy. These are reactions and responses through other mechanisms creating all of these issues here. And then we look at foods. They can really change our hormone flow. This is a slide showing that soy is an example of a potential hormone-reactive food intolerance. There's a lot of foods that have hormones in them and foods that will change our own hormonal regulation. Within our gut, there's a bacterial lining called the microbiota or the flora. That microbiota can produce every hormone and every neurotransmitter that we can possibly make. One of the interesting things, see a study that relates to this, is what we eat determines how healthy our flora is. Healthy flora will produce healthy neurotransmitters and healthy hormones. Unhealthy flora will produce unhealthy neurotransmitters and unhealthy hormones. Some of those unhealthy neurotransmitters can be the cause of our previous slide on depression, anxiety, ADHD, all of the psychological disorders that go on out there can be a huge effect. There's also certain foods that will shut down hormone function, like goitrogen foods. Those are typically your crucifer family. If those are grown in an area of soil depletion of minerals, it can make it so that those crucifer vegetables don't give us the benefit in the liver detoxification that we're supposed to. It can also bind tyrosine, which will reduce our thyroid function and create goiters, different things like that. Flax is one of the most potent food sources of estrogens that there is out there. That can completely dysregulate a woman or a man's estrogen cycles. Yes, men have estrogen cycles as well as women, and both men and women have the same hormones inside them, just in different levels. And different foods can really change those quite a bit. Corn is one of those examples. Most of the corn used in the food industry has been sprayed with atrazine. Atrazine makes males in the animal kingdom so they can't produce testosterone, can't produce their reproductive cells called sperm. That's the case of insects, reptiles, fish, birds, and mammals. Corn can literally can take the sexual organs of different species and convert those into the opposite sex. That's a common occurrence. It's been studied fairly extensively with frogs, male frogs being turned into female frogs that can produce fertilizable eggs. They'll turn into tadpoles, highly mutagenic. Same thing happens with fish. Fish in waters that are full of estrogen, male fish will show both sexual organs and become unable to reproduce. So that's a really big issue on hormone disruption that foods can create. Then we look at the issue of how we eat. This is a study on putting people on a typical American diet that's going to be high fat, high protein, low amount of vegetables, and pretty much highly refined carbs. Whenever that happens, it changes the flora that's inside of us. Within a month, it'll give a 71% increase in the fragments of gram-negative bacteria that spill outside of the gut from a leaky gut and overwhelm the liver. Those are called endotoxins, mostly LPS. When people eat properly with a high vegetable intake diet, healthier fats, no really refined carbs, and more complex carbohydrates in their diet, they decrease their endotoxin levels by 31% in the same month of eating. So we look at this slide. This is what I had just talked about. The extra toxins that what we eat create inside of our gut will make the gut start to leak. When it starts to leak, it lets out LPSs. LPS is lipopolysaccharides. It's part of the cell walls of gram-negative bacteria, very toxic stuff. Well, they act as superantigens. Superantigens can start to create autoimmune responses in any tissue within our body. Autoimmunity is pretty simple. The body becomes toxic. It can't process the toxins. It can't excrete them through the toilet like it normally does. The toxins start to deposit into our tissues. When they become too toxic, the immune system starts to attack them. I have that more extensively in another video, be worthwhile looking at in the autoimmune section. But when that starts to occur, it creates two different things. There's a mechanism called molecular mimicry where the LPS molecules will start to mimic other things and make the immune system start to attack it. Or the LPSs will start to deposit in different tissues and make them toxic and start to attack it. Whenever there's an LPS leakage, the gut starts to leak. Within hours, that makes the blood-brain barrier start to leak also. The blood-brain barrier is supposed to keep bacteria, any kind of infective issues outside of the brain and only let certain nutrients into it very specifically. Well, whenever there's LPSs in the circulation system, it starts to break down that blood-brain barrier and makes the brain leak. When the brain starts to leak, it can create amyloid issues, which is the cause of some of our neurodegenerative cognitive issues, dementia types of issues. It can create foggy brain. It can create inflammatory degeneration that goes on inside of the brain. It can let the brain become susceptible to infective agents, which with Lyme disease, that's a huge factor. It can also be a very big factor with encephalitis, different things like that. So it's a really big thing. So we're looking at our foods creating a toxic issue in the gut that has global effects in our central nervous system, throughout our body, in every organ system that there is. By the way, toxins, when they can't escape through our gut or our bladder into the toilet, they try and get out through our secondary elimination organs, which is our skin and our lungs. That's the large part of the cause of skin rashes, atopic dermatitis, a whole host of rashes that go on inside of the skin, and asthma, respiratory difficulties, and things like that. This is one of the root causes of things like that. They look at further studies. Whenever cattle are put on a grain-fed diet, they have a 1,000-fold increase in pathogenic bacteria in their gut within about 5 days. The reverse happens also. You take a grain-fed cow, you put them on a grass-fed or a hay-fed diet, there's a 1,000-fold die-off of pathogenic bacteria in the gut. As the microbiota starts to normalize. With the highly reactive pathogenic microbiota, we create pathogenic digestive issues. We rot our food. We ferment our food rather than digest our food. With that, we start to create inflammatory hormones rather than normal hormones. It can really be the basis of creating all kinds of protein deficiency issues, protein malabsorption issues. When we can't absorb proteins properly, we can't make proper structures. This predisposes us to connective tissue injury, whether that's skin, ligaments, tendons, muscles, bones, things like that. Very, very far-reaching what this does. So when we start to look at a typical approach of food intolerances, most people are thinking about allergies. But they're spending a lot of money on 2 to 3% of the responses or the potential reactions, not having any idea what the 97, 98% are. One of the biggest allergy testing places in our area, up in the upper Midwest, is La Crosse, Wisconsin. The initial consult with them is $800 to $1,200. That's not treatment. That's not finding out what's causing things. That's just a consult trying to find out what some of your intolerances are. When you look at the typical cost of allergy testing, a consultation with an allergist is $150 to $300, and then it's $3 to $5 per allergen that's tested. And we commonly test for around 120 food intolerances. So at $5, that's $600 on top of that. If we look at the blood tests, the serum tests that are used for allergies, the cheapest of those is around $200, $250. About a decade ago, when I was really looking at those, the best blood allergy testing was about $750 per test. It would take 3 tests to find out globally what's going on inside of somebody. So it's pretty darn expensive. When we compare that to what we do, we test about 120 different foods, plus a few other toxins on a standard course for $200. You really got a question with you for that type of a low cost is when you start to do the elimination diets to try and understand or try and find out what kind of food intolerances you have, less than 25% of the responses you're going to have are inside the gut. The rest are who knows where else going on in the body. With the blood type of testing, you never have an idea where those are reacting in the body. With more of a natural side, we can commonly find out what organ systems, what foods are affecting. And it depends on how deep we go. But the standard testing is about 120. And we can go up from there, depends on how deep we need to do it. So if you're interested in that, be wise to hit the link on this, get a hold of us, we can set that up. Something beyond that is, why are the allergies there? That's some deeper testing, which really has a whole bunch more value. But with all the people trying to guess with all that, not having any accuracy in what they are finding, we have, through our own testing, we have found such significant impacts in different people's lives. We've had young children at 4 years of age that can't even go outside. Every time they get a cold, they're hospitalized on nebulizers, atomizers. Come in, we start dealing with the allergies, and they become normal again. Go to school and never have a sick day. Go outside and play again. People's cognitive functions start to come back. Food intolerances and what they cause are a significant part of probably all chronic illness. We do a lot with chronic illness. It is a huge part in everyone that we see with chronic illness. So if you're interested in that, hit the like down below. We'll be back with more videos like this. And you can hit the link up above and it'll take you over to where we can set something up if you're interested. Thanks.